Good morrow everyone, Silvershire here, and welcome back to Palette Swap, where I rank the costumes and character designs of your favorite fighting games. And by your favorite fighting games, I mean, actually it's been like 40 episodes, I think that joke has run its course. Today, we're looking at Jann Lee. But before we begin our analysis, here's a quick refresher course on who Jann Lee is and what we should be looking for in his character designs. This is probably going to be my fastest lore recap ever, because Jann Lee has a pretty straightforward story. He's an orphan, because of course he is, he's a fighting game character, who grew up watching Bruce Lee movies and taught himself the art of Jeet Kune Do. Come adulthood, he became a bouncer and entered a bunch of fighting tournaments for fun. And yeah, that's about it. A lot of Jeet Kune Do characters fall into the trap of looking like off-brand Bruce Lee, but Jann manages to avoid that, at least in the original Dead or Alive. He's wearing a sleeveless top, arm wraps, and traditional kung fu pants and shoes. The Hanzi for dragon appears on his chest in arm wraps, which ties nicely into the dragon motif on his pants. This makes sense because dragons are a symbol closely associated with both Bruce Lee and Jann Lee. He ripped off Hwang's hairstyle, and even though it's nothing unique in the fighting game genre, it sets him apart from the rest of the DOA cast, as does his flashy color palette of red, purple, and gold. Overall, this costume is nothing special, but it works well. 6 out of 10. DOA takes a quantity over quality approach to alternate costumes, especially in the later games. I made a poll in the community tab asking if you were okay with me skipping around, and most of you were, but not everyone. So as a compromise, I will cover all of Jann's costumes, but I won't spend too much time on them. Costume 2 is a variation of his default. It removes his shirt and shoes and changes his color palette to blue, white, and gold. I like that it's more than just a palette swap, though it's more plain. 6 out of 10. Costume 3 is a casual look. It's a nice change of pace, but not that interesting. He does have some complementary splashes of orange and blue to break up the mostly desaturated palette. The front of his shirt says Koha, but as far as I can tell, that doesn't have any significance unless Jann is a big fan of Sri Lankan birds, Maori gift-giving, or library databases. 5 out of 10. Costume 4 is a white suit with a lavender tie and a pair of sunglasses. Jann has a lot of suits, and this is probably the most unique one due to its color palette, but it's still pretty basic. 4 out of 10. Costume 5 is another suit, and it's a tad more generic, but not enough to lose points. 4 out of 10. DOA++ gives him a couple new costumes, the first being Discount Soul Bad Guy. Red is my favorite color, so I'm a fan of the palette, but this doesn't really feel like Jann Lee to me. There's no dragon imagery, there are no Bruce Lee homages, and it doesn't even look Chinese. It's just a sort of generic anime protagonist look. 5 out of 10. His other new costume is a black and red palette swap of Costume 2, which reminds me of Martial Law from Tekken. This color scheme is a classic for a reason. 7 out of 10. His main costume in DOA 2 is more clearly inspired by Bruce Lee, although it's not a one-to-one recreation of any of Bruce Lee's outfits. I like the dragon emblem on his back, but aside from that, I don't have much to say about it. It's less flashy than his classic look, but it suits him. 5 out of 10. Costume 2 is a simple palette swap that makes his coat white and blue. The DOA wiki claims that it's actually lavender, but if it is, it must be an incredibly light lavender, because it absolutely just looks white. White would also make more sense, because Bruce Lee often wore a white coat with black pants, such as in Enter the Dragon. Anyway, I think this is about on par with the default. 5 out of 10. Costume 3 is the same as his ++ costume. Since I don't take graphics into account, the same score applies, and I'll be skipping any repeats from here on out. Costume 4 looks like a repeat of his classic Costume 2, but there are some differences. He's wearing shoes and has plain bandages instead of cool arm guards, the latter of which being a significant downgrade. 5 out of 10. Costume 5 is yet another suit. 4 out of 10. Jann gets a couple new costumes in DOA 2 Hardcore. The first, unsurprisingly, is another suit. 4 out of 10. The second is a white tank top, which is probably a nod to Bruce Lee's look in Way of the Dragon. Despite the reference, it's boring. 4 out of 10. DOA 3 gives Jann his simplest default costume yet. He's just wearing white pants with a red dragon motif, some red wristbands, and a pair of red sneakers. I do like the pants, but the rest of his outfit is too plain for my liking. 4 out of 10. This costume's alternate color is black and gold. I'm usually partial to red costumes, but I think I prefer this version. The gold accents really pop out against the black. 5 out of 10. Costume 2 is similar to his main costume from the previous game, but his top is tucked in and he's wearing some simple armbands. I don't think these changes make it significantly better or worse. 5 out of 10. This costume's alternate color is yellow and black, likely referencing Bruce Lee's iconic jumpsuit from Game of Death. It's a neat reference, but it doesn't change how I feel about the design. 5 out of 10. Costume 5 is, drumroll please, another suit. I have nothing against formal wear, but Jann's are all so basic. They're not unique and they don't communicate anything significant about him as a character. For comparison, look at some of Tekken's suits, which have way more flair and personality. Or better yet, look at what Bruce Lee actually wore. 70s fashion is many things, but boring is not one of them. 4 out of 10. In my opinion, DOA 4 has the best overall selection of costumes for Jann Lee. Not that that's a high bar to clear. His default appearance has a cool half-and-half design. One side is pure black, while the other is shiny gold and covered in a dragon pattern. That swaps for his pants, which keeps the outfit feeling balanced. This isn't that dissimilar from what Jann has worn in the past, but it's way more eye-catching. He finally looks like more than a generic kung fu guy. 9 out of 10. Costume 2 is simpler, but still solid. He's wearing baggy chaps with a black, red, and white fire design, and he has a matching symbol on his gloves. I like the long tassels hanging from his belt, which adds some secondary motion to his animations. 8 out of 10. Costume 3 is clearly based on the Game of Death jumpsuit, but there are a couple differences compared to Bruce Lee's version. There's a dragon emblem on the back, and he's wearing a long-sleeved undershirt with the same pattern as the jumpsuit but inverted colors, which is neat. It doesn't get many points for originality, but it looks good enough to earn a 7 out of 10. Unfortunately, even this game cannot escape from the boring suit curse. To be fair, it does have a tiny bit more personality than his earlier designs. His shirt is mostly unbuttoned and his blazer is loose and baggy, so he seems carefree and casual. That's still not enough for me to go above a 4 out of 10 though. His DOA 5 design reminds me of something that Maxie from Soulcalibur would wear, which is definitely a compliment. That's due in large part to the sash around his waist and the gold dragon medallion holding it in place. My only issue with this costume is that there's nothing going on with his torso. Something on his chest or upper arms would break up the design. 8 out of 10. Costume 3 is his most boring yet, which is really saying something. It's literally just a shirt and pants and shoes. He looks more like an accountant than a martial artist. 3 out of 10. Costume 4 is a variation of his default. It adds prayer beads around his neck, some leather straps on his chest, and a metal pauldron. The additional armor makes him look even more like a Soulcalibur character, and it makes his upper half more interesting. His sash is now blue and green, which looks nice, though it doesn't help him beat the Huang knockoff allegations. 9 out of 10. Costume 7 is a casual look, but surprisingly I kind of like it. His shirt says the dragon on the front, and there's a cool emblem on the back. He still looks like a fighter thanks to his bright red gloves. He has a loose belt that calls to mind a martial arts belt. I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10, which honestly I'm not sure it deserves, but I appreciate that they put some effort in. Costume 8 is a classic Chinese martial arts uniform like the one Bruce Lee wore in Fist of Fury, which I'm surprised Jann has gone so long without. It's a nice option to have, but it's nothing special. 5 out of 10. Costume 9 is barely a costume. I assume it's meant to be a reference to what Bruce Lee wore during his fight with Sammo Hung in Enter the Dragon, but he's missing the shoes, shin wraps, and padded gloves, so he just looks like a guy in his underwear. 1 out of 10. Costume 10 is a Santa suit. It definitely stands out from his other costumes, but it's the most basic, bog-standard Santa you can get. They didn't even give him a hat, which I assume is because he would be completely unrecognizable without his spiky hair. I don't love all of Street Fighter V's Christmas costumes, but at least they did something uniquely suited to each individual character. 5 out of 10. Costume 11 is part of a Halloween-themed DLC, and it gives him a goofy green and yellow dragon costume. This is a fiery breath of fresh air compared to the mundanity of his other alternate costumes. It's a cute and colorful design that feels unique to Jann, and his ultra-serious face just makes it all the more funny. I also like that he still has bare arms and bandages around his wrists. Even if he's going to a costume party, he still needs to be ready to throw some punches. Part of me wants to see a more serious take on a dragon-themed costume for Jann Lee, but I don't think it would be as memorable as this. 7 out of 10. Costume 13 is a superhero outfit, taking some loose inspiration from Bruce Lee's role as Kato in The Green Hornet. I like the idea, but it's too close to civilian clothes. If not for the mask, he'd just be some guy with a scarf. This costume was part of a contest for fans to submit their designs, and I think the original concept art is better. 6 out of 10. Alright, let's see if we can speed through the rest of these. Costume 14 is a yellow and black ninja outfit with a dragon emblem on the back. It's a pretty straightforward ninja design, but simply by having a clear theme and a strong color palette, it's one of Jann's better looks. 7 out of 10. Costume 15 claims to turn him into a werewolf, but that would be unique and interesting, so of course they didn't do that. Instead, they just slapped some ears and a tail on him. 2 out of 10. Costume 16 is inspired by Sun Wukong, the Monkey King from Chinese mythology, though it's a pretty basic depiction of him. 6 out of 10. Costumes 17, 19, and 20 are cosplays of things I don't care about. 5 out of 10. Costume 18 is boring swimwear. 2 out of 10. Costume 21 is a panda thing. 6 out of 10. Costume 22 is even more boring swimwear. 1 out of 10. Costume 23 makes him look like a bargain bin Resident Evil character. 4 out of 10. Costume 24 is a football uniform. At least it looks like what it's supposed to look like. 5 out of 10. Mercifully, Jann doesn't have that many costumes in DOA 6. His default appearance is similar to his main costume from DOA 4, but with a color scheme and dragon motif closer to his main costume from DOA 5. I like how blousy his pants are and how long his belt is. They give him a strong, distinct silhouette. I prefer the ancient vibes of the waistcloth and armor, but this still looks good. 7 out of 10. This costume has a couple of recolors. The first is blue and yellow, much like his classical. I think it's about on par with the default. 7 out of 10. The second is yellow and red, which reminds me of Law's Tekken 4 1P. The bright colors make this my favorite of the bunch. 8 out of 10. He also gets some recolors of the Game of Death jumpsuit. The first is black and red. It loses out on the Game of Death reference, but since red is my favorite color, I'm a fan. 8 out of 10. The other is blue and darker blue, which looks alright, but obviously isn't that varied of a palette. 6 out of 10. Costume 3 is a better take on the Enter the Dragon outfit. I like the color palette and the nunchucks. 5 out of 10. Costume 4 actually does something really cool. Just kidding, it's another suit. 4 out of 10. Costume 5 is the least interesting pirate outfit imaginable. 5 out of 10. Costume 6 is more swimwear. 3 out of 10. And his final 2 costumes are repeats of the last game, so I'm finally free! And with that, we have ranked every single Jann Lee costume. Let me know in the comment section down below if you agree or disagree with any of my rankings. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, I bid thee farewell.